This is Music Theory Fundamentals, Lecture 3. Today we will learn about half steps and whole steps, but first, we'll do a quick review of grand staff, ledger lines, and enharmonics. After that, we will learn chromatic half steps, diatonic half steps, and diatonic whole steps. You probably remember our grand staff from our previous lecture. Grand staff has both treble and bass clefs beamed together in one staff. You probably also remember our discussion of ledger lines, how they can go above or below the staff. Today I want to talk to you about something called middle C. We have an 88-key piano keyboard on the screen, and you see the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 underneath 4 of the keys that are highlighted in blue. The highlighted key above the number 4 is what we call middle C. We call it middle C because it's the C right in the middle of the piano keyboard. We can find a middle C easily on the treble or bass clef. On the treble clef, we start with the E at the bottom of the staff, move one step down to a D, and then another step down to the first ledger line below treble clef. That's middle C. You'll notice on the screen that if we start at the A at the top of the bass clef, move up one step to B, and then one more step to the first ledger line, that is also a middle C. They both use the same key on the keyboard. They are both middle C. Now this is important to know because sometimes we'll see pitches in our treble clef, such as the ones in the picture here. A C, one ledger line below, B, one step below that, and A, two ledger lines below treble clef. Those same three pitches can be represented on the bass clef. Middle C, which is where we started, B, which is one space at the top of the bass clef, and A, which is the top line in our bass clef. The notes on the left and the notes on the right sound exactly the same. They sound like this. You might be asking yourself, why? Why can we write the same pitches on treble clef with ledger lines below that we can write on bass clef with ledger lines above? Well, there are longer answers to that question, but the short answer is sometimes it's an editor's choice because the editor might like the way that the notes look better coming down from the treble clef or coming up from the bass clef. Sometimes, like in beginner piano music, they're written that way because the right hand plays the treble clef notes and the left hand might play the bass clef notes, although this certainly changes as a pianist becomes a more advanced reader. Whatever the reason, the most important thing to know is that there are overlapping notes from the treble clef going down ledger lines or from the bass clef going up ledger lines. The notes circled here in yellow overlap with each other. A going up to E in the bass clef, E going down to A in the treble clef. They're the same pitches, just written differently. Let's do a quick enharmonics review. With our grand staff and our keyboard, we represent here an A flat, an F sharp, a D sharp, and a B flat. So What are the enharmonic equivalents for each of those pitches? One way to find out is by locating them on your keyboard. If we find the key that represents A flat, we see that it can also be called G sharp. F sharp shares a key with G flat. D sharp shares a key with E flat. And B flat shares a key with A sharp. These are all enharmonics. One quick word about accidentals. You see that I've written two pitches on the staff here. One is on a line, one is on a space. Both have a sharp symbol before them. When you write a sharp symbol, it's very important that the center of that symbol hovers over the line or space that belongs to the note that it is modifying. The same is true for accidentals that are flats. You want the center of the open part of your B to hover over the line or space that it belongs to. If you write a pitch and put a sharp somewhere other than the line or space where it belongs, as pictured here, this is considered incorrect. Let's talk about intervals next. An interval is the distance between two pitches. Over the course of this class, we are going to learn about a lot of different intervals: seconds, thirds, fourths, fifths, and so on. But today we'll focus our efforts on half steps and whole steps. Today we will discuss two types of half steps: chromatic and diatonic. Let's start with chromatic. A chromatic half step shares the same letter name, the same line or space. Here we have our possible accidentals and a list of letters underneath: A, F, D, G, and E. Right now, we would assume that we are discussing A natural, F natural, D natural, G natural, and E natural because we don't see any indication that they are anything but natural. If I put a sharp sign next to each of these letters, that raises the pitch by a chromatic half step. We know this because a sharp is higher than a natural. Similarly, if I were to put a flat sign next to each of these pitches, it would be one chromatic half step below natural. Let's practice this concept. What is a chromatic half step above B? Well, we know it has to be a B something because it shares the same letter name. We also know that this is a B natural, not a B sharp or a B flat, because we don't see a sharp or a flat next to it. So if we want to find a chromatic half step above B, we need to take it from a B natural to a B sharp. What about a chromatic half step above C? Same rule applies. Currently, we have a C natural. We want to bring it a chromatic half step higher. Chromatic means it's going to be some kind of C, and a half step above natural is sharp. So we have a C sharp. What is a chromatic half step below B? Well, if we're going a chromatic half step down from natural, we'll arrive on a flat. So lowering a B natural by a chromatic half step means that we get a B flat. One more. What is a chromatic half step below C? If you said C flat, then you have the correct answer. Let's practice this on a staff. I provided you with 4 pitches here. A in the treble clef, G in the bass clef, F in the treble clef, and B in the bass clef. What pitch is one chromatic half step above each of these pitches? All we need to do at this point is take them from natural, where they currently are, to sharp. And we can do that easily by placing a sharp sign in front of each of these pitches. What pitch is one chromatic half step below each of these pitches? Well, remember, sharps go up. So if we want to go down to the chromatic half step below, we need to add a flat because flats go down. What if we're not starting from a natural? What if we're starting from a sharp or a flat? Well, here we have listed A sharp, F sharp, D sharp, G sharp, and E sharp. If we want to raise each of these by a chromatic half step, we'll need to take the sharp and move it up to a double sharp. It looks kind of like an X. And if we're on a flat and we want to lower by a chromatic half step, we'll need to turn that flat into a double flat. Let's practice this for a moment. Each of these letters, with its corresponding accidental, is listed here, along with an arrow indicating whether you should find a chromatic half step above or below each letter name pitch. Can you figure out what they all are? Pause the video if you need a moment. So bringing an A sharp down, we would arrive at an A natural. Bringing an F flat above, we would arrive at an F natural. D double sharp can be lowered by a chromatic half step to D sharp. G double flat can be raised by a chromatic half step to G flat. And finally, E is raised by a chromatic half step to E sharp. Let's talk about diatonic half steps. Diatonic half steps move to the adjacent letter name, the adjacent line or space. Let's practice these on a staff. I have the same 4 pitches represented here that we were working with earlier. What pitch is one diatonic half step above each of these pitches? We start by finding the neighboring line or space directly located above our given pitch. You'll notice that if we're on a line, our neighboring pitch will be 1 space above, and if we are on a space, our neighboring pitch will be 1 line above. So the pitches we've written are B, A, G, and C. This tells us what our letter name will be. If we start on an A and we go up a diatonic half step to the neighboring line or space, we arrive on some kind of a B. if we look on our keyboard and move from A up to the neighboring key 1/2 step away, we see that we arrive on an A sharp or a B flat. Which one is it? It's B flat, because we placed a note on the B line. Similarly, our G moves up to some kind of A. If we look on the keyboard, we see that that would be an A flat. Next, we'll look at the F in the treble clef, which goes up to some kind of a G. That's a G flat. And finally, our B in the bass clef, moving up by 1/2 step, we arrive on a C. That's a C natural because that's the white key that has the C name. So we don't have to change anything about what we've written here. We don't need to add a sharp or a flat because a diatonic 1/2 step above B is C natural. It's correct as written. When constructing diatonic 1/2 step intervals, what is the first step? Now this question, what is the first step? That's a question I'll be asking you a lot over the course of this class. The answer is, put it on the staff. Why is it important to put it on the staff first? Well, when we start on a keyboard, it's easy to get off track with our enharmonics. We might end up choosing the wrong one. For example, if I start on a G and I move up to the neighboring key, I see that it's a G sharp or an A flat. Which one is the diatonic 1/2 step? This is why we put it on the staff first. Here's a G in the treble clef. I'll need to move up to some kind of A because A is 1 step above on the staff. So between the G sharp and the A flat's the correct answer here. Always start on the staff to be sure you are using the correct enharmonic. Let's practice some more. I've put 4 pitches on the staff for you, but this time we added some accidentals. B flat, G sharp, E natural, and B double flat. Can you find the diatonic 1/2 step above each of these notes? What's the first step? There's the question. The answer is always, put it on the staff. So with our keyboard for reference and our staff underneath, we're going to write a note 1 step above each of these pitches. Now we'll look at the keyboard to decide whether we need to add a flat or a sharp or another accidental in order to find the diatonic 1/2 step away. We start on a B flat, moving up by 1 step. It looks like we've landed on a B, but actually, this is a C flat. If we had written a B, that would have been a chromatic 1/2 step away. C flat is a diatonic 1/2 step above B flat. Similarly, when we start on a G sharp and move to the neighboring key above it, we arrive on an A. This is an A natural. So the correct answer for what is a diatonic 1/2 step above G sharp is A natural. Let's take a look at the E. Move up a 1/2 step to the neighboring key. We arrive on an F natural. That's the pitch we've already written on the staff. And finally, B double flat. Here's where things get a little more complicated. We know that a diatonic half step above B double flat needs to be some kind of C. We also know that a B double flat on our keyboard is 2 half steps below B. It looks like an A. It's spelled like a B double flat. B double flat and A natural are enharmonics. They sound the same. They function differently. Back to our B double flat and the diatonic half step above. Here's our B double flat on a keyboard. There's the key that's a half step above it. Is it an A sharp or a B flat? Neither. Why? Because it has to be some kind of C. Let's remember that we use the adjacent space. That tells us that our answer needs to be some kind of C. Well, what kind of C is it? What C letter note is located on this black key? We find our answer by starting on a C natural, the white key with the letter name C, moving down 1 chromatic half step to a C flat, then moving down 1 additional chromatic half step to a C double flat. By doing this, we discover that A sharp, B flat, and C double flat are all enharmonics. They share the same key on the keyboard. They make the same sound, but they are spelled differently because they have different functions. But C double flat is the only correct answer to the question, what is a diatonic half step above B double flat? Because C is 1 step or 1 space, 1 diatonic step above B, the B line in our bass clef. Let's do a little bit more practice. This time, find the diatonic half step below each of these notes. What's the first step? By now, you should know the answer to this question. Put it on the staff. So we start by writing in the pitch that is 1 line or space below each of the pitches given. Our first note is a B flat, which will go down a diatonic half step to some kind of A, because A is 1 space below the B line. So we find B flat on our keyboard, and then find the key 1 half step below B flat. What kind of A is it? A natural. We don't need to add any accidentals to this note. Next, we find that the line directly below our bass clef G sharp is F, which means we are looking for some kind of F. To find a diatonic half step below G sharp with the letter name F, we find G sharp on our keyboard and then find the key 1/2 step below G sharp. It looks like a G natural, but what do we call it? Remember, it needs the letter name F. If you said F double sharp, you got it right. See if you can do the next two on your own. Start by putting it on the staff so you can know you have the right line or space, giving you the right letter name. Then check your keyboard and compare it to the staff for the correct enharmonic spelling and accidentals. Pause the video if you need a little more time. If you said that a diatonic half step below E is D sharp, and a diatonic half step below B double flat is A flat, you are absolutely correct. Let's move on to diatonic whole steps. Diatonic whole steps move to the adjacent letter name or the adjacent line or space. Now, this might sound familiar to you because we said the same thing about diatonic half steps. So, what's the difference between diatonic half steps and diatonic whole steps? To find a half step interval on a keyboard, you simply move to the neighboring key. To find a whole step interval on a keyboard, you need to move 2 keys or 2 half steps away. 2 half steps equal 1 whole step. Let's practice. What's the first step? Hopefully you're saying it out loud by now. Put it on the staff. Let's find a diatonic whole step above each of these notes. Start by placing a note head on the line or space above each given pitch. Now that it's on the staff, we can count on our keyboard 2 half steps from each printed pitch to the pitch we've written in red, which tells us the correct letter name. This will help us to find the correct enharmonic. We land on a C white key, a C natural. This is already correct. We change nothing. A diatonic whole step above B flat is C natural because it has the letter name C and it's 2 half steps up. We move 2 half steps up from G sharp to A sharp because it's on the A line and it's 2 half steps away on the keyboard. Let's do the E in the treble clef next. 2 half steps above E is F sharp because F is 1 line above E and F sharp is 2 keyboard keys away from E. Finally, we have B double flat. 2 half steps above B double flat, which looks like an A but is spelled like a B double flat, is C flat. Looks like a B, but we need to spell it with a C letter name because it's on the C space. Now let's find a diatonic whole step below each of these notes. Once again, start by placing a note head on the line or space below each pitch. Now that it's on the staff, we can count on our keyboard from each printed pitch to the pitch we've written in red, which tells us the correct letter name and will give us the correct enharmonic spelling. Starting on a B flat, going down a diatonic whole step, we know we're going to arrive on some kind of A. 2 half steps down, A flat. Starting on the G sharp in the bass clef, we know we need to move down to some kind of F. 2 half steps down from G sharp, that's an F sharp. Let's keep going. 2 half steps down from E in our treble clef, we land on a D. That's a D natural. You can write the natural sign in if you want to, but in this context, it's optional. Finally, B double flat, going down to some kind of A. Well, remember, we start on the key that looks like an A but spelled like a B double flat. Move down 1 and 2 half steps and we've landed on something that looks like a G. But we need to spell it like an A double flat because in order to be a diatonic whole step, it needs the letter name A. Let's review what we talked about today. We started with overlapping ledger lines in treble and bass clef. Remember that one ledger line below treble clef is a middle C, and one ledger line above bass clef is also a middle C. We reviewed some enharmonics, and we talked about the placement of accidentals, making sure that the center of our sharp or flat sign is over the line or space that it belongs to. We learned about chromatic half steps, diatonic half steps, and diatonic whole steps, and we practiced writing them with letter names and also on the staff. You should be prepared to write chromatic half step, diatonic half step, and diatonic whole step intervals, either with letter names or on a staff, on our first written test.